Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Our Value Creators subject today is learning. Learning is fundamental to value creation. We must learn, of course, what customers value, what they want, what they need, and we must learn how to design a value proposition, a solution that helps them to meet that need. We must also learn how to design an organization that has the capacity to deliver that value proposition. We must learn how to work together collaboratively to do it as a team. And so learning is more than just knowledge accumulation. It involves humility, knowing what you don't know. It involves action, triggering those feedback loops that give you the new information on which you can base your learning. So it's building a competitive advantage, and it's building a better relationship with customers.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Our guest today is Damon Lembi. Damon brings us the most wonderful perspective. He's been at the very top of a very competitive sport, baseball, where he played at the college level, up to and including the College World Series, where he was a winner, and he was drafted into Major League Baseball. It doesn't get any higher than that. He has a long string of successes behind him in that sport. And he's the CEO of LearnIt, a very contemporary, fast-growing modern company that provides teaching services, i.e. the learning capacity for its customers, in skills from technical skills to leadership, change management, and storytelling. He has a lot to share with us. Damon, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
Hunter, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor for us and really exciting. You have had great success in two of the most challenging fields in human endeavor. That's competitive baseball and being the CEO of a growth company. You've put them together in a very interesting way. You've developed a concept which I'd never come across before. You call LearnIt All, which we'll explore. And you have generously put that together in a book called, I'm going to read the title, The LearnIt All Leader, Mindset, Traits, and Tools. So you're telling us about LearnIt All. So we're fascinated to learn. And a good place to start, I think, since we're talking business, Damon, is the learning organization. You use that term and you talk about a culture of learning. Tell us what a learning organization is and how you describe that.
Great. So how I describe a learning organization is an organization who champions learning. There's a lot of organizations out there, Hunter, who say, that they invest in their people and they invest in training, but they really don't. Maybe they purchase training and then they expect people to go out and figure out how to go about training. When I say a learning organization is an organization that invests in their people and also creates space for their people to try things and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. You look at an organization like Google is famous for, I believe that they let their team dedicate 20% of their time to really work on what they wanted to and come up with ideas and try things out and fail and learn from those and progress. To me, that's really the difference between a learning organization and a organization who's not a learning organization.
Yes, I'm fascinating to know how that actually works, Damon. That's a great description. And I'm trying to visualize, we're inside this company, we've got projects, we evaluate them. We say that leads to innovation, it leads to adaptiveness, but how does it actually work? Do I have meetings that say, what did I learn today? What am I going to do? How does it physically work in the corporation?
Different corporations is different. So there's multiple different ways it can be. What I like to say is, and it's important to learn, but it's also important to execute on what you've learned. You can't spend all your time learning but what I'd like to say, and when I see adapt and innovation, is come up with ideas, think them through, look at them from diverse perspectives, try to understand what you want to move forward with. Good is better than perfect. Move forward, take some, and make some MVPs and try things out. Test it out, see how it works. And if it doesn't work, try something else. So that's typically how I see it. But you want to get away from the approach of having everybody, the status quo of like, well, this is typically how we do it. it comes back to like a lot about what I'm talking about in my book. With one of the key traits is being curious and thinking about things like challenging yourself to see, is this really the best way to do something? Or are there other ways? Having a beginner's mind and being open to innovating and adapting and evolving.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we often think, Damon, about business schools teaching best practices and processes. And that's kind of the essence of doing things the same old way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Like you said, best practices. Best practices are typically what's happening current in the past, right? So we want to come up with better practices. What can we do differently? What can we learn and evolve on? To give you a little example of that, I recently brought in a new sales leader, completely from outside of our industry. I think that it was important because he's helping us open up our mind to see about how we can approach our sales differently, and our methodology differently. And sometimes when you're so in your bubble, Hunter, I've been here, 20 plus years, and so have some of our sales reps. We have our, what's a famous term, strong opinions held lightly. Like we really believe this, but if somebody comes in and says, hey, let's try this, let's do this differently, you want to kind of get behind it and try that out and move forward with it.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about your own company, LearnIt. Let's tell people about that. I characterize it as a learning and development organization. I love the title. You say this yourself in the book, LearnIt, which whatever it is, you can come to LearnIt to get instruction. So I looked at your website. It's very deep and very broad in what you teach. There's technical learning, there's change management, there's storytelling, there's leadership. But you started more modestly, let's say, with IT training. So tell us a little bit about the journey story and what you've learned about helping people to learn.
Great. So the story for LearnIt is, so my father actually founded LearnIt back in June of 1995. And so quick background with him, his name was Walter Lembi. Unfortunately, I lost him to cancer in 2010. We were one of the largest real estate companies in San Francisco. We had a hotel chain, multi-tenant buildings. And in the early 90s, he was trying to figure out how to digitize his portfolio and not have everything on paper. And so back in 94, 90, 95, computers were just kind of get going for individuals. So he bought a Mac, went and took a class. He actually brought one of my sisters with him, went and took a class, and the environment was sterile, boring, and an instructor sat there and just, Hunter, it's read from a book.
Yeah,
And so
I remember those classes. I attended them.
right. And if you knew Walt Lemby, you knew his attention span was about 30 seconds. And he grabbed my sister at break and he said, Chelsea, let's get out of here. And he said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, he got curious of how can we deliver training and learning so that it's engaging, it's interactive. And at the time, we had these 90-minute modules, which were much different than what everybody else was doing. He called up a gentleman who used to be the CFO of our savings loan in the 80s. He's like, you're the only guy I know who knows how to use computers. This is my idea. So he basically went out and wanted to solve his own challenge. And that's really where LearnIt came about. I was finishing up my baseball career. My career at Arizona State was just ending. And I was saying to myself, well, I don't know if any of these skills are transferable. What do I do now? And so I was fortunate to have all these different opportunities from the hotels and real estate, but I wanted to really learn and prove that I belonged. So I started as a receptionist and answered phones, taught classes, did some sales. And fast forward about 6 years later, I was able to move into the CEO role. And really, like you mentioned, we evolved. We started off as an IT training company, and we did a lot of certification training and a lot of the end user Microsoft Office. But as time evolved and our customers' needs evolved, we moved into delivering soft skills, which I really don't like calling them that, but the leadership, the management, communication. And that's where we've evolved over the last 20, 28 years. So a lot of skill building with a focus mainly on leadership and management.
So let's dive into a couple of elements there, Damon. You have many teaching techniques that you've got. I'm reading my list here that I put together from your website: private classes, workshops in groups, a learning community, learning labs, new technology adoption programs for companies, training videos for both real time and shifted time. What have you learned about the best way to learn? Or is it a combination of all those things? Is it different for different people? Tell us about the techniques of teaching and learning.
Well, that's a great question. Our belief is that everybody learns differently. Some individuals like myself is I prefer live classes. I'm fine with virtual or in person. Some individuals prefer having short on-demand videos. And so, yes, we do have a very robust offering that we work with our B2B customers. And what we try to do is we try to meet with them and really understand what's best for them. And we usually start with what are the business outcomes they're looking for, the challenges, and then work backwards. And Hunter, as we all know, a lot of times it's a combination of things. You can't go in, take a 2 hour class on feedback, giving feedback, and become an excellent coach for your team where you need the continuous learning to help make it sticky. So we try to create a learning journey for our customers. In doing so, we add in a lot of different modularities that people can do from virtual instructor led to on demand. We work with them to figure out what's best for them.
And probably, as you say, it's a combination, right? We should, if we commit to learning, there's lots of ways we can do it.
Absolutely. And I think getting back to great organizations that are learning organizations versus organizations that aren't, I look at it this way. The organizations that aren't, let's use the example of somebody trying to lose weight or get healthy. They jump on the treadmill once and they do it for an hour and a half and they think that that's it. They're done, right? It's similar to a company or a customer who comes to us and says, we want to incorporate training into our corporate retreat for 90 minutes. Can you teach us emotional intelligence, how to be a better leader, and maybe even throw in some tips on Excel? Well, that's, learning is really a marathon, not a sprint. I think it's important. The great organizations, they know that they're strategic and they build training and learning, formal and informal, throughout their culture. That's the big difference, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that too, and think about the Lembi family of businesses, if that's the right way to put it. I mean, you as a family have been committed to this learning and progress, and you've gone in many directions and always learned and always been successful. So it's a family matter.
I wouldn't say always been successful, but we've had our plenty share of failures. But you do your best and you learn from those and move forward.
Philosophically, we discount the idea of failures, Damon. You look at the whole journey, and
Yes.
the little bits of ups and downs in between are not that significant. I want to ask you one more question about your business model. The other thing you find out when you go to your website is you've got this incredible array of instructors and coaches and experts and strategists and so on. How do you attract all those people, and what's the business model that binds them together? It's very, very impressive, the team you've collected.
Well, thank you, Hunter. I mean, I don't have any secret sauce or superpowers, I should say, but if I did, I feel really grateful for the talent that I've been able to attract at LearnIt over the years. Over the years, if you look back at our alumni, we have CEOs of companies, we have unbelievable people who've passed through the doors here. I think really what we've done, LearnIt's done a great job of finding great talent. A lot of times we hire for potential over experience in a lot of cases, and we're looking for people who have the aptitude, want to grow and evolve. And then we create a culture internally for ourselves of providing learning opportunities, giving people the autonomy to actually do the work and not jump in and do it for them. And from that, what that's really helped create for us is, well, very strong culture. But also when people leave, some people stay a couple of years, some people stay forever. But it builds a network for us where people are always referring people in to LearnIt. In my book, I talk a lot about individuals who left, and they'll call me up and say, you got to really talk to this person. They'll fit great in your culture. So I think that that's something that we've done. We've created a strong referral chain, but we also look for very specific things in the interview process. We're looking mostly to see if somebody would be a strong culture fit. And a lot of times, people will come in, and I'm a big believer in focusing on their strengths. Once we have somebody, maybe they start off in sales, but they're better off as an instructor. We want to try to figure out where their strengths are and really guide them towards their strengths.
Yeah, let me drill down into that, Damon. You talk in your book, you make an acronym out of the word learn.
Right.
You use the initials to indicate strengths that you look for in people. And let's do them one at a time, because I want to get some insight into how you identify those strengths. So one is lifelong learning. So how do I look at an interviewee and say, this person's going to be a lifelong learner?
Well, typically in an interview process, that's kind of easy. One of the questions is, share with me, what was the last book you read? Have you seen any good documentaries lately? And you can kind of get an idea right there if they have an aptitude or an interest in evolving. And, Hunter, for us, it kind of stops right there. We're a learning organization. If you're not interested in developing yourself, how could you possibly be passionate enough to work or excited enough to work with our customers to help them? Because this is what we do. So that's an easy question during the interview process.
So the next one is embrace change, and that goes into a whole other area. Learning is wonderful, but change is sometimes uncomfortable, and people don't like it. So how do you identify that somebody can embrace change?
Well, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, that's a real tough one. And that kind of comes back to the whole, I guess, the theme of my book. Learn it all versus know it all. A learn it all is somebody who keeps an open mind and is willing to pivot, where a know it all kind of is set in the stone, and they think that they have it all figured out. I guess it's just getting back to asking questions, or maybe even if you're checking in on references, is asking for examples of something that you've helped take part on that really helped evolve the company, right? Something that was done differently. Like, can you give me an example of where you've come in, you've been part of a team, and you were able to make a process more efficient or try something differently? I really try to do a lot of it through stories, asking stories that they were involved in.
The A in learn is act like owners.
Mhm. Accountability. I think accountability is key. If you're going through somebody's resume and they've had multiple jobs, which is okay, but it's like, okay, why did you leave this job? If it's a common theme that, well, I had a bad manager or this happened and it was their fault, and it's instead of somebody saying, hey, you know what? When I worked at this company, we tried this didn't go well, but I took ownership for it. I think that one of the keys to building a strong culture is a culture of accountability. But that starts at the leadership level, that if you allow people to admit that they made mistakes, then people are much more likely to come forward with those mistakes that they've made and own it.
Your R is rally around customers, and that strikes a great chord with us. We talk about empathy as a key business skill, being able to take the part of the customer, understand the customer experience from their mental model, from their mindset. Empathy is a tough skill. And so, is that what you're looking for when you say rally around the customers? And how do you find it?
I mean, that is a tough one. So maybe I'll just throw that back to you. How do you find empathy with working with your customers?
Well, we have this little tool we call mental models. So we try to have people think about, what is a mental model? It's the way you see the world. Well, what is somebody else's mental model, even if it's different from yours? And then if that's their mental model, how can I help them think things through and evaluate things in a positive way? So we think in terms of mental models, which is a bit of a manufactured structure, but it's helpful.
I was listening to one of your previous episodes, and I think you were talking about this a little bit, where you're looking at a customer and you're saying, okay, where are you at now? But really, where do you want to be too? Right. And how do you help bridge that gap between the two?
Yeah.
I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I think that's the nature of economics. You're trying to get betterment and growth and well-being. Which brings us to the end, nurture a growth mindset. So what's a growth mindset, Damon?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really common term, but for growth mindset is really rewarding the process over the end result. Sometimes, so you look at it, even if in school, if my daughter doesn't get an A in her class, but she's put in the effort, let's say she does get an A in the class, but is it because she's sharp, or is it because she put in the work to get there? And to me, growth mindset is, not yet. Sometimes you make mistakes and something doesn't happen. So the answer is, oh, I can't get that done, or this isn't going to happen. Or I prefer to hear somebody say, I'm not there yet, but we're going to get there.
Yeah. Good. And then all of that outcome is a culture. You've used that word a few times, and the great debate in the nature versus nurture kind of approaches. Can you actually build and design a culture, or does it emerge after you've hired all those people? So, which camp are you in? If you're in one or the other, the build a culture or the culture emerges.
I think the culture emerges. And the same happens with sports. You look at some of these sports teams that go out, they hire all the top, the elite players, and they don't win, it's because they don't have a team culture. I'm of the camp of that culture emerges, and a lot of it starts with the leadership. We work a lot of that with our customers. As a leader or a manager, you're always on stage. People are always looking and seeing how you're behaving, what you're doing. So you're shining a light. They're always shining a light on you. And if you're doing the right thing or you're making the tough choices, they're going to follow after you, and that's going to lead into the culture that you're trying to set, or that's what's going to happen.
One of the terms you use in the descriptions you have is a coach and coaching. And you've seen it in two very different and very important ways. One is, in your baseball career, you're at the tippy top. You were in the World Series and in college baseball, or the College Baseball World Series, I guess I should call it. You were drafted to the major leagues. You met lots of coaches. They sounded very different from the little bit you said in the book. But what's the essence of coaching? How do we coach?
Yeah, I was incredibly fortunate. I bounced around to different colleges, and I played for three Hall of Fame baseball coaches at Pepperdine, College of San Mateo, and Arizona State. And really, I learned a lot from them as far as how I've modeled my leadership over the years. And I would say the essence of coaching, it's similar in sports and business, but it's more holistic. To me, coaching is you're working with individuals on what they're interested in, along with what you need them to do, and you're investing and you're being patient and helping them, so to speak, evolve, right? That, to me, that's coaching. And you're providing support and guidance. What you don't want to do, what is not coaching, is jumping in and doing the work for them. I see that with a lot of the customers I have or the people I mentor, especially somebody who goes, again, let's talk about sales, going from being an individual contributor or salesperson to a sales manager, where they're in a sales meeting and they just jump in and take over. That's not coaching, because if you have great talent and you want to nurture that talent, you want to sit back and allow them to make the mistakes and learn and try, and then coach them afterwards. Ask them questions like, hey, what do you think went well? What would you have done differently? Get that out of them, to me. So that's really, it's holistic, and it's helping them evolve in their job or their position, or even helping them in life.
I can see that in baseball. People come with their skills, and you help them evolve into better team players or more confident players, or you can instruct them in getting a little bit better technically, maybe. Is that the same in business? Do people come to you with the skills, or do you need to develop their skills as well?
I think that typically people have skills, specific skills. And I'm a big believer too, Hunter, in focusing on people's strengths over weaknesses. I think that I think you get a much bigger bang for your buck if you find out what the individual's strengths are, what skills they have. And as long as you can align that with the role that you have them in at work, in the workforce, or at least move them into that, and then help build those skills. Like at LearnIt, going back to our business, we don't just teach knowledge, we teach skill building. So maybe somebody has some, skills when it comes to listening, but we want to really help them evolve or improve those skills. So I want to believe that people have skills, they do, and take what they have and improve them.
Yeah, learning to learn is one of the concepts I took from your book.
For those out there listening, I think learning agility in today's day and age, in the future, is probably, and I tell this to a lot of people, the most important skill that you can have. If you look at the rapid pace of change, and you look at the lifespan of skills, used to be 5 years. Now it's as short as maybe 1 year. So you got to continuously be learning and evolving. And so I think learning agility, along with AI and everything else that's going on, is, you keep adapting and learning. I think that's critical.
Yeah, and in fact, part of your book, you divided sections into being and doing. And the being part was really interesting. You've touched on part of mine. It's very philosophical. You mentioned curiosity, but you just said something about humility, I think. And you have this great phrase where, humility says, I've got to keep learning, but you need confidence to be humble. So tell us about that.
I think humility, and I think that vulnerability, I think it's kind of a paradox, right? I mean, the old way used to be, as a leader especially, it's like, never admit your mistakes. Don't show any type of weakness. And I think in today's age, great leaders aren't afraid to admit that they don't know everything. And that's why great leaders surround themselves with people who are better than they are. And a lot of times they're open to saying, hey, you know what? I don't have all the answers to this. Help me out here. And that takes confidence, right? That takes confidence because especially if you're a new leader, let's say, or promoted into a C-level role, you could be fearful that maybe by admitting your weakness, that people don't have the faith in you to be able to be in that position. So that's where I think that there's a paradox between humility, where being open, and then also having confidence enough to admit that you maybe made a mistake or you don't know something. Now, with that being said, I'm not talking about, Hunter, always apologizing all the time. Like, oh, I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry for that. I like how Warren Buffett opens up most of his annual shareholder meetings or notes with, some of the big mistakes that they made and what they learned from them. But he doesn't drag on and just apologize over and over again. He just states what he learned and how they're going to move forward.
Yeah, so there's another expression in your book in the being part that maybe weaves into this. It's complex, I understand, but you see, go all in. So we're going all in and learning. We're not holding back. And the corollary of that was struck me was you go all in to overcome your own fear. So the humility, courage, fear. Tell us all about that. Do we all have fear?
What do you think? You think we all have fear? I think so.
Yeah, in the way we look at things, we call it uncertainty. You don't know what the future's going to bring. So yeah, there's a little bit of nervousness that comes across there, but you take action. I think you said that yourself earlier on, and then you see what happens. Now, yeah, I can be fearful about finding out what's going to happen, but I've got to act. But tell us your perspective on fear.
So my perspective is, so first of all, I have, like you said, I have the being and doing. To me, being is all about the mindset, and you look at James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where he's like talking about, identifying as something. So being is like, hey, I'm somebody, I'm a learn it all, I'm always willing to learn. And then the doing is taking action on something. And I really think, the best way to overcome your fear or the uncertainty is, and I talk a little bit in my book about, struggling with imposter syndrome. I
Yeah.
learned great lessons from sports that I've carried on my whole career. Was for me, the fear was, am I good enough? I mean, I was an All-American out of high school and drafted, like you mentioned. But when I got to Pepperdine, everybody was as good as me, right? They were all as good as me. And I'm like, well, do I even belong here? And I see that happen in the corporate world with our employees sometimes, but especially with clients. Like people will like, I don't know, I was promoted into this role. Do I even belong here? And my thing is, that's for them to figure out. You got the job, go all in and do the best you can. And so my 3-step approach that I look at is for imposter syndrome. One is work hard. Put in the reps. I'm not saying work 10 to 15 hours a day, but put in the hard work. Number 2 is focus. It's easy to procrastinate and move off of what you're concerned about, but really focus in. The word escapes me right now, but it's like disciplined learning. Focus on it. And then number 3 is, once you do those first two, kind of learn and let go. You've done your best. You're at the point, say you're nervous about or fearful of making a speech or whatever. If you've prepared, when the time comes, just let go, do your best. And if it goes great, great. If it doesn't, learn from those mistakes and move forward.
Yeah. You mentioned Warren Buffett. We think a lot about Charlie Munger because he talks about mental models all the time.
Yeah.
He talks about weaving a tapestry of mental models, and I feel like that's what we're doing here. So there's another important weave in this tapestry, which is, you're going all in. You're looking for mentors and coaches, but be principled. So have your own principles and stick by them.
Yeah.
And that ties into something you call return on ethics. There's a return if you're ethical and principled. So tell us your thinking about that, Damon.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, going back to my first baseball coach, Andy Lopez, he only had 2 rules. Rule number 1 was show up on time. Rule number 2 was do the right thing. Show up on time is pretty self-explanatory. You show up on time, you're not late. Do the right thing. Sometimes the players would say, "Well, coach, what does that mean? What does do the right thing?" That's kind of broad. He's like, "You know what that means. Do the right thing all the time." Getting back to ethics, you've seen over the history of what happens with organizations, on a large scale like Enron that are, doing shady things. And even at a much smaller scale, the toxic environment it creates. I have a story of somebody we worked with where one of their team members, cheated on a contest, but since they're a high producer, they're still there in the organization. I think that Hunter, that cascades throughout the organization. And as we talked about, creating the environment or culture you want, being unethical and cutting corners, I think it will catch up with you in the long run, personally and professionally. So I think that there's a lot of value to understanding what your principles are and sticking with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great image, and I think, as you say, you apply them as the CEO, and people are going to observe that and becomes part of the culture. You had an interesting take on decision making. So we're big on decision making and uncertainty, and you said there are two types. There's the screw it, let's do it, and there's the carefully considered decision, and you're good with both of them.
Well, first of all, there's plenty more types than just two, and I'd love to talk to you more about all. I've always been really fascinated with decision making. I've read a bunch of books, and I've always, very fascinated on decision making. And the two you're talking about, screw it, let's do it, which was made famous by Sir Richard Branson, and then being careful and calculated. Those are kind of almost in reverse. I look at it in my book. I coined a phrase called purposeful awfulizing. And what I really mean by that, and I know there's different ways to say it, but let's say that you have a big decision, and you fast forward 1 year and look at what the results would be. And if the results are something you could live with and you could tolerate, it's not going to bankrupt you, put you out of business, or put you in jail. If it's going to put you in option to put you in jail, you should never do it, of course. But you look at what's going to happen to you in a year, and if you can live with that result, then it's time to go for it. Like Jeff Bezos says, if you have 70% of the facts, you're never going to get to 100%. Move forward and go for it. And now, if you look at it and you say, hey, I'm putting all of my ducks in a boat, and if this fails, it's going to put us out of business or whatever, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, look at different options, get diverse opinions, and try something different. Like I said, I have one chapter in my book about decision making, but there's so much more to it. That was just kind of my thoughts.
That was great. And the other part of that we highlight a lot, and I like to get your perspective on it from a learning perspective. We call it feedback loops. So we've touched on this. You take the action, something happens in the marketplace. You make the sale, you don't make the sale. You get a feedback loop, and then you've got to feed that back literally, and get people to observe it and calculate on it and change. Do you actively promote those feedback loops, or does that just happen as a part of doing business?
Would you consider feedback loops to be the same as postmortems?
Yeah, that's a tool for feedback loops. We call them AARs, after action reports, which is the Marine version.
Yeah, AARs. Yeah. So you have the I think Amazon again does like the pre-mortem, and then you have the postmortems. But no, I think that a lot of times in big decisions we do that, where we do a postmortem and kind of look back and see what we could have. We just had in-house, we invested hundreds of thousands of dollars on a new learning management system, and it failed. It failed, and it was a tough nut to swallow. But I was kind of proud of ourselves because we didn't fall for the sunken cost fallacy, right? And we put all this money into it, and we could continue down the road and put more money into it. But at this point, I don't even know if it would work out. But we got together as an executive team, and we really said, what could we have done differently And at what point should we have learned that we should have abandoned ship and not wasted 16 months or whatever it is we did? So, yeah, postmortems are great. I also am a big fan of decision journals. On bigger decisions, I'll kind of write out in a journal like what I'm hoping, what the best case scenario is, what I want to get to, and then I'll refer back to that and kind of see, if I was able to accomplish that, where I fell short, and the steps along the way that cost me in falling short.
Huh. So you have decision A, a whole journal for that, decision B, a whole journal for that. Is how it works, or you mash them all together? How do you do it?
I learned about it in the Farnham Street. Those guys.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and so they have a whole template in there for it. But I've used it over the years, and it's like, for instance, let's say we're going to invest in a new technology. Kind of write out like what are the different options that we can go for, and then what decision you're going to take, and then what the outcomes you're looking for, and why you didn't choose the other options, and think about what the best case scenario is, what's the worst case scenario, and then kind of check back 6 months into it and think to yourself, why was I thinking this? And a lot of times, Hunter, it helps you identify blind spots that maybe you weren't considering that you should have. And maybe it's somebody who came to you as part of your team who gave feedback that you just overlooked. Maybe you're looking for confirmation bias or something, right? And you just overlooked what they had to say. So it's a good learning tool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a new one on me, but I know the Farnham Street blog, so we'll link to that for people that can find it.
I would. You can find it there.
Yeah, good. So I was looking for a wrap up, and I think I'll find it in Play to Win, which is one of the metaphors that you have. It links your baseball life and your business life. We can be humble, we can be curious, we can ask for coaching, but in the end, you play to win, which is not breaking the rules or stretching the rules. Is just commitment.
Yeah, I mean, and I like to say too, there's play to win, right? But there's also win well. You know what I mean? There's act as if, act like you've won before. Win, whether in sports or in business, be humble with your wins. A lot of times, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. I'm very competitive and want to win whatever deals we can, but you want to win well. Losses aren't always that bad. There's so much you could learn. I used to get really frustrated and upset a decade ago with losses, but now it's too much negative energy, and I think it's use it as a learning opportunity. So play to win well, and win from your losses by learning from your losses.
Yeah. And be principled while you're doing it.
Be principled while you're doing it.
Good. Well, Damon, thank you. The name of your book for everybody is The Learn It All Leader, Mindset, Traits, and Tools. We'll give a link to that. We'll give a link to your Learn It website. You're on LinkedIn as well, so we can link to that. And good luck with the book. And I hope you'll come back and talk about decision making. Maybe you and I can frame a conversation just around that, because that's how you move forward and learn, right? You got to make the decisions first and then learn from them.
Yeah, I'm in San Diego quite a bit, so you might hear from me. I'd love to get together and learn from you on decision making, because I think it's super fascinating. And Hunter, thank you for having me on your show today. Yeah, if you can't, connect with me on LinkedIn. And I also have a new YouTube page, Damon Lembi, and we're putting out there for free a lot of our soft skills content. Every week I'm releasing full-length videos, not me, of our fabulous instructors who are teaching us everything from how to build habits to how to give feedback. So thanks again, Hunter, for having me here today.
So Damon, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hunter.
And how do I search YouTube, guys? Search Damon Lembi, or do a search Learn It? What's the search term?
Oh, search Damon Lembi, because you'll find our Learn It channel actually has 500,000 followers, but it's all technical skills, so that's great. But if you search for my name, we're just releasing all our soft skills on-demand videos through my channel.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.